Hey, everybody. It's John Bell and my buddy Tom Hoyer. And this is The Reset. Welcome to our humble little podcast. Today, we're going to, among other things, if we don't veer in one direction or another, we're going to be talking about Trump's most recent unhinged, untrue, and bizarre rant of a speech that he recently gave. We're also going to talk about a very disturbing set of activities centered around a presidential directive trying to outlaw and basically turn anyone who doesn't agree with the Trump regime into a domestic terrorist, put them on lists, and do all kinds of nefarious things with it. And then we're going to wrap up with a conversation around Democrats primarying other Democrats, what that means, whether it's good, not good, what our opinions are on that. And that'll take us through the whole episode. I'm going to turn it back over to Tom to kind of start us off on Trump's speech and what he thought about that. And then we'll get cooking. So welcome to the show, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Yeah, I can't help but watch the speech. I couldn't help but watch the speech the other night. It's almost like, same phenomenon, like you're drawn to look at the automobile accident that's blocked you for miles back as you pass by, the rubbernecking thing. There's just some fascination with freak shows, I suppose. So I did watch it in full, and it was only a matter of about 20 minutes or less thereabouts, but it was a real bizarre performance on his part. I took away from it that, he's feeling the heat, he's feeling desperate. And, it's coming from a place, I think, and I'm not a psychologist, but you look at this guy and he's really struggling with the idea that people are not accepting or giving him recognition for hard work he's done and his brilliance. I mean, you can tell this guy honestly thinks that he's got the answers. He's working hard. He referenced the tariffs again, despite the failures that we know have happened when presidents have implemented tariffs in the past, despite people that study this their whole lives, their profession, telling him this is not a good idea, despite the fact that no other president in recent memory has done this kind of level of tariffs. He thinks, and he says so, that he's the only one with guts and intelligence to do it. He's the only one that's ever considered it. Chock full of lies. I watched it on NPR. The administration sent every media outlet that was going to televise it in prime time a list of charts that they were to reference and post beside him as he was going through his list of topics. And of course, they all refused because they couldn't verify them, with the exception, of course, of Fox, who dutifully posted charts that would show things such as groceries falling and wages increasing. It was just full of lies, factual inaccuracies. He said things like, "I'm not done yet," and he's referring to grocery prices. But boy, are we falling grocery prices in his statement. But boy, are we making progress. Nobody can believe what's going on. And that's probably the only true thing he said, because we are not believing what's going on out there. Again and again, just like Biden fully understands now that you can't convince people of what they're experiencing. The simple
Right.
fact of the matter that when you go to the grocery store, things are outrageously expensive.
Yeah.
And they're continuing to go up, and your wages are not keeping pace. Simply not. This is one he's never going to get around because, gas prices, which have fallen some, not to the level he stated the other night, but not everybody drives. So not everybody feels it. Everybody
Right.
eats.
And the cost of other forms of energy uh, is actually going up. So, you've got, I agree, you got pretty friendly gas prices, but people are seeing across the country serious increases in the price of electricity. And that's a big problem pretty much everywhere, I think. and and I haven't really checked on like home heating oil and other stuff. But I think you're exactly right, Tom. Like, you can, I mean, he's gotten away with lying about a lot of things, but when you go to the grocery store every week or multiple times a week, and when you're, buying, the staples, the things that you are purchasing day in, day out, you really can't get away with lying to the American people too much on that because they have the lived experience. And I agree that was something I don't think that the Biden administration engaged in lying, but I think that they didn't show the right level of sensitivity, and they wanted to sell the economic progress, and I think there was a way to do that without just trying to convince people because GDP is going up or some measure of the economy that most people don't really pay attention to or relate to, that everything was okay. And that didn't help for sure. And Trump spewing lies about it for 18 minutes isn't going to, you know, it isn't going to make sense. Well, I mean, I think the average American just views it as untrue, and just, probably upsets them to hear that type of lie being thrown in their face. I thought it was, yeah, I didn't watch the whole thing just because it's really hard for me to watch that man lie about everything and expect people to buy into it. But the thing that I noticed besides like just all of the counterfactual stuff was that I think he was on uppers. I think they fed him full of Adderall because
I
it
thought,
was supposed to be a 30-minute speech and he delivered it in 18 minutes. He was just angry the whole time, yelling, blaming Biden for everything and saying how great everything is and great everything is going to be. And the whole time he seemed pissed off that he even had to give this speech. Like, he was pissed because he wanted to get back to drawing, doing color between the lines on his ballroom blueprints and decorating that in gold and other, bunch of bullshit. But yeah, it was a bizarre thing, but it's kind of what we've come to expect from this guy in terms of just trying to gaslight everybody, blame everybody else for, an economy that I think's going off the cliff, man. I think you've got
yeah,
inflation. I think there's a question now about the numbers even that they're producing in terms of inflation, and they're playing games with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I think that inflation is worse, and it's worse than is reflected in the numbers they're putting forward. And at the end of the day, it all goes back to, well, what are people actually experiencing? I think it was a disaster in
I
terms of
do
a
too.
speech.
His ratings reached their lowest levels of this term last month. And it was in particular on cost of living. A lot of people voted for this guy because he's convinced them that he's this, genius businessman, super successful, despite his history. N- he basically took ownership of it. Like, yeah, I'm going to fix it on day one, right? Because I'm a smart genius. But here we are practically a year later, and all he can do is blame it on the guy before him. If you have ever worked, most people have, in a role where you were hired to replace someone who didn't perform well, and a year later, you're not doing the job, but you're still blaming your predecessor, I can tell you're going to be shown the door immediately. You don't get to blame your predecessor. That's what you were hired for, is to fix it and to do better. But this guy has never had a job. I mean, this is what he's done. I just don't know what kind of DNA mutation that we've got, that some people have, that, somehow they can't detect total bullshit, you know. And I've seen this having my entire career, corporate America. I've sat in audiences where someone from the C suite, you know, large telecom companies would come in and start talking. And, right away, you're like, this is not really what's happening here. But you could look around to your friends, otherwise smart, intelligent, you know, just respected. They're nodding along with it. And I'm like, no, I don't think this is right. I don't know what it is. I can't explain it because, it's so outrageous at this point. And Trump's always been outrageous, but it's basically pushed the envelope that it's almost unwatchable. You just can't.
Yeah, yeah.
you-
I sorry to break in. I was just agreeing with you, and I think if you look at you referenced his approval ratings recently, and they're I mean they're basically lower across the board, and just like absolute approval rating for for his job approval are the lowest of both terms for Trump, and they're historically low, possibly lower than any other president in history. It kind of speaks to, like, if you look at it, he's been pared down, I think, to just his base. And so, like, if you compare it to the 2024 election, and that was unimaginable to me. I still don't understand how enough people could have voted for him to put him back in office. But just, assume for a minute, people forgot. Maybe people had, different understanding of the economy, what it was like under his watch versus Joe Biden. I don't know. But I think that you just have so many people that they're predisposed to want to believe him from an ideological perspective because they've been brainwashed, whether it's owning the libs, whether it's hating on trans or LGBTQ folks, the whole racism thing, how they pick on those groups constantly. And it's not by accident. Like, they're trying to pick people and groups of people to be against. And so if you've bought into that program, you're going to want to do your best to try to believe them on the economy, but it's not working. And I think you're starting to see his base is starting to come apart. His support is softening even among the diehards. You're seeing shifts in numbers. Like, for example, I may not get it exactly right, but, like, if you look at the number of people within the Republican umbrella that identify as MAGA versus non-MAGA, well, MAGA is declining
Yeah,
significantly. And
correct.
so
By
I
about 10
just think,
points over the last
yeah,
few months.
significant. Yeah, something like that. And so I think you're seeing the beginnings of a fracture. You're starting to see people, sort of in the podcast space and the punditry space start really fighting with each other out in the open. You've got Ben Shapiro, calling out
Right,
Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, sort of the Nazi wing of MAGA. Candace Owens, who's just batshit crazy. But I mean, they're all sort of like, they all stake out their little fiefdoms of terribleness
right,
and, putrid, lines of thought. But they're fighting with each other, and I think, they've got, I mean, their leader is that type of person, and it's not a surprise that you have this collection of really terrible people in this movement. And without, sort of like, if Trump isn't winning, then it's almost inevitable that they're going to go at each other's throats because that's the character of who they are. And so, I I think it's a good thing for America that this is happening, but, like, it doesn't, I mean, good relatively in that hopefully they lose power sooner rather than later. But the amount of destructive force that they have and the corrosive effect on our society is terrible because, like, Trump's Trump's going to be gone either in 3 years or sooner if he keeps shoving Big Macs down his fat gullet and guzzling Diet Cokes. He's already senile by my estimation, and looking at his behavior, and a lot of other people think that too. So I think he's deteriorating mentally and physically before our eyes. But the thing is, I want to bring it back more to MAGA and the MAGA movement because they've learned that lying to the American people pays off.
Pays off.
Yeah. And that's what disturbs me the most is that I don't think, Trump kicking the bucket tomorrow or 6 months from now or having to leave office at the end of his constitutionally limited term. I don't know that that helps us all that much. I don't think we can just assume that the world suddenly becomes a better place. I think that we're going to be facing this MAGA corruption going forward, and they're all liars. I mean, yeah, Trump gets on and lies about the economy, but then all of his, you know, all of his minions go out there and repeat the same lies. They're not gonna suddenly start telling the truth about anything. Like what I don't know what incentive they would have to do that. So I expect more of the same, whether it's, Just Dance Vance, um, little Marco Rubio, who's probably behind most of the warmongering in Latin America. I mean, they're all just a nest of vipers.
We're going to do an episode, I'm sure, the first one of 2026 with our predictions. I'm going to
Yeah.
save mine for that. But to close this particular conversation out here, um, this is a guy that is obviously unhinged. He just simply lies. He doesn't know. At one point, he said something to the effect of, you know, they've raised cost of law enforcement to a point that cannot even be mentioned. Now, if that's not a grasp of hard data, I don't know what is. I mean,
Yeah.
most people should have just turned, just shut their laptop down and went back to, you know, whatever social media platform. But
Yeah,
just
yeah, the only thing
plainly
yeah.
unfit. He's just plainly
Yeah,
unfit.
he's always been unfit. He's demonstrating every single day and every time that he opens his big fat mouth that he's unfit to lead this country, that he is all about. I mean, whether it was this speech, whether it was attacking Rob Reiner in the most despicable possible way after the man and his wife were murdered by their son. He's a psychopath. He's a
I,
psychopathic
he does,
individual, and
and
the
he.
people that buy into his bullshit need to look whatever. They need to go to their own therapist or they need to look themselves in the mirror, but nobody should take anything that comes from this administration as anything other than something designed to enrich themselves. They're all a bunch of con artists and scammers, fraudsters, whatever term you want to use, but they're there for the grift. They're there to steal money from you and me and try to convince enough people that they're doing something when none of their you want to talk about the economy, none of their decision making is based on what's best for the economy, for growth, or for you or me or anybody else. It's about how much money, how much cash can they shove into their pockets and get away with before they're finally kicked out of office and hopefully held to account someday. But that's what we're watching. We're watching a lawless, illegitimate regime grift in front of our eyes and then try to gaslight people. And it's disgusting. And it's, you know, it hopefully we can bring it to an end. It is just constantly a display of, a complete lack of ethics and morality.
I wish there were a poll that tracked um just your feeling. Do you feel like shit on a scale of 1 to 10? I mean, because
It's
the
the
president
enshittification meter.
in shitification meter, and how do you feel? Because the president is, essentially the mirror of the country. He's supposed to be a role model. And what we see day after day, after a while, you just begin feeling like shit. And I believe that really, high prices, etc. We hear that again and again about like, that's what's got him down for a disapproval because of affordability. And, my response is that's it. That's the only thing that's got you down on this guy? Really? Like you're
Yeah.
totally okay with everything else as long as you could get cheaper groceries. I'm like, I don't believe that. I believe most people are feeling like shit. And I hope everybody coming into next year's elections and on beyond, you know, are going to ask that question of their challenger and say, what are you doing about people just feeling like shit? And I think, there's just a hard rock in the stomach of most people on a day-to-day basis. They just don't feel good and they don't have anyone to look to that's going to tell them, this is how we Americans get through. Kennedy gave a speech that said, leaders, there's no leader. Okay. Anyway,
Right, but I mean, just to put a straw man out there, like you're saying, a real leader. I mean, I expect any administration to try to sell any accomplishments that they've accomplished, that they've achieved. Sure, that's reasonable, but like a real leader would come out, look in the camera, and say, "Okay, here's what we've done. Here are the results so far. We've made some progress, but I'll admit to you right here and right now that it's not enough, that we have a lot more work to do. Prices are still too high in blah A, B, C, D categories." I mean, it's not like we don't know. It's not like Americans don't know food's too expensive, energy's too expensive, housing is way
education,
too
healthcare,
expensive,
housing, just
healthcare, all of it, the whole basket of things.
right.
I saw one thing, and then I know we need to move on to the next topic, but like there was this discussion on one of the podcasts I listened to today. Actually, it was on MSNBC. I'll say that, but it was an interesting conversation. It was somebody in the finance industry that studies what the kind of like historically how they put together the poverty line, and that's like 32
Right,
thousand dollars roughly right now, but that's based on something they put together in 1960, and it
right.
really all it did was total up like how much food do you need to survive, and then multiply it times three, and then it's been adjusted for inflation. But that's kind of like where we are versus like you know the whole basket of things to have a decent life that you need. And so the argument is that the actual poverty line should be, depending on which part of the country you live in, ranging from like 80 some $1,000 just to get by
Yeah,
in the cheapest areas to
yeah.
up to, like New York and
145 or something like that. Yeah,
180 even, but
180.
somewhere in that range. And like basically, if you averaged it out, you're talking about more like 136,000 or something like that for a family of four. And I think that's more reality because like you go beyond that, and then there's all these disincentives. Like you have certain social support programs which are totally inadequate, but like you know basically you can go from that level and having some level of support up to 136, and your situation doesn't really improve. You go out, work harder, get a better job, make more money, and you're still treading water because then they take everything, all of the support mechanisms and programs away from you. And that's kind of, I think, emblematic of where we are as a country today. And that's why I don't care. Like you could do any kind of artificial thing to try to temporarily make, gas prices lower, whatever. That doesn't address like the whole structural problem and
No,
imbalance that exists. And
no,
and when you have people lying about it and not being straight with the American people, that things aren't going to get better until we elect better leaders.
exactly. Exactly. Okay. Let's move on to something that has happened recently. And it's frankly one of the scariest things that, I can imagine happening. I predicted it. I've talked to everybody about it for a long time. But, it's finally been put into kind of a presidential directive. This is the National Security Presidential Memorandum, NSPM7, you may have heard it referred to as. This is the National Joint Terrorism Task Force and local offices, the JTTF, which shall consult and coordinate with executive departments and agencies, that being our CIA, FBI, Homeland Security, the people that have all the data on us, and can apply their authorities to support the JTTF's investigations and relevant prosecutions of political violence. Now, on a December 4th memo from Bondi, she confirmed to the Washington Post that these are the organizations, their metrics they're using to evaluate domestic terrorists. Those listed as anti-American, anti-capitalism, anti-Christianity, opposition to law and immigration enforcement, radical gender ideology, hostility towards traditional views on family, religion, and morality. These are the characteristics of some of those who might merit investigation. There's not a more vague, nebulous measuring stick for who you want to go after just because. This is it. And I would put to someone who has a MAGA father, family member, friend, that's just still a red hat wearing MAGA. I'll give you a scenario. If one of Trump's billionaire petrochem supporters, one of his allies, wants to put a pipeline through your MAGA uncle's front yard, and he doesn't like it, he is screwed, right? Because if he protests, well, that's against energy, which is against America, which makes you
It's against
anti-American,
capitalism.
right? Anti-establishment.
Yeah.
Which means
Put them on the list.
Put them on the list, pal. You're being investigated. Probably be dragged into some hole somewhere, ask a series of questions to find out what your views on America are. I can promise you there's no right answer for you, and you will be disappeared. And they're going to get that pipeline right through your property, pal. And all you can say is, but I voted for you. And you forfeit the law, pal. You got no protection. That's all we are, as a country of laws. And that's what's happening right now, is a total forfeiture of law. So we've seen this kind of thing when you basically put down a list, which basically says, through our observation, we're going to determine if we like you or not. You know, what is a traditional view on family? I know what it is. It's white Christian nationalist view, where the wife is at home wearing a skirt, kissing the man at the door, serving dinner to the table. And, that's their Norman Rockwell view of that. But I'm telling you that this is so subjective, that this is a real, clear and present danger to everyone in this country. If you don't believe me, just think about it. Think about Nazi Germany, where you could just be dragged away for nothing. Think about it. Think about
Yeah,
Russia,
Tom.
Soviet Russia.
I mean, every authoritarian regime that I ever studied, one of the first things they started doing was making lists of people. And
Yeah,
they're making, and this, I agree, this is, I mean, on one hand, it's ridiculous on its face. And but I don't think that we should take that. I mean, it's ridiculous in its vagueness. It's ridiculous. And like you said, like, what the hell is a, so-called traditional view on the American family? What constitutes anti-capitalism? Where in the
right.
Constitution does it
Yeah,
say I have to agree with capitalism? Like,
correct.
these are all, most of these things are opinions that different people have, differences they might have. You might have 20% of the country that sort of in some fashion agrees with what they're getting at, like whatever the traditional view of family is. And that's fine. You can have that view of the family, but like what they're trying to do is make anyone who disagrees with it labeled as a terrorist. And, then they're going to target you either to disappear you,
Yeah,
they're going to send ICE after you. They're going to do something, or they're going to they're going to put your name in a list that goes to the IRS and like, okay, well,
correct.
like, see what this guy or woman has done on their taxes, or, it's a mechanism to intimidate, discriminate, and then potentially persecute
Mhm.
anyone who doesn't agree with the regime. And I got news for you, America, that's fascism. So anybody that doesn't like me or somebody using the term fascist to refer to this regime, their activities, their baseline philosophy, get over it. Get the fuck over it, because this is what authoritarian and fascist regimes have done throughout history. This is out of the playbook, and we should absolutely be calling it out and talking about how dangerous it is for this type of thing. And it's not just like, yeah, I get that Trump has put out a bunch of executive orders and directives that have amounted to either nothing, or people have immediately taken it to court and at least temporarily put a stop to it, and have some type of injunction against it. But there's not one that I'm aware of, and maybe that's a little bit of research I need to do, but I don't know that there's an active court case that would put a stop to this particular thing. And even if there is, it is so dangerous and so anti-democratic. It goes against everything that this country has ever been, takes us to a place where none of us want to be, because if this allowed, this type of like totally against the First Amendment, totally against probably a bunch of other amendments, it's anti-constitutional. At some point there's going to be somebody on the left that isn't a good guy that gets some power and does this to you. Like if you're on the right and you think this is a good thing, like, oh, well, this is just owning the libs. No, this is not owning the libs. This is a complete affront to how democracies, healthy democracies operate. And it's not also, there's a building in McLean that now houses people dedicated to this effort. It's not theoretical. It's not just one of his useless orders that went into like the air and didn't do anything and just like is stupid and annoying, but like maybe not that harmful. There are people, operating under this framework now. And virtually, I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, like by all description that Tom just read, I should be on the list. Like I'm on that
Right, right.
list,
That's right. That's right.
you know,
Yeah.
and I'm just as American, just as patriotic as anyone, and believe in uh, things that would make life not just better for me or for people that look like me or believe like me, but for everybody in the country. I don't want to put every Republican in jail, for example. I don't believe that's
No, no, no,
right,
no, no.
but this is the type of thing that, like, you know, that at some point, right now they're building concentration camps for immigrants. But all of that infrastructure, ICE and the masked, jackbooted thugs that are running around this country, bashing in people's car windows and dragging them into the street, busting down doors without warrants and without probable cause for any legitimate crime. This is the next step. Like, this is what they're going to use to try to squash opposition. And it is scary as hell.
That's right. And so, if you think that, oh, Tom, you're a liberal and you're pearl clutching kind of thing, to use the same scenario I mentioned a few minutes ago, you know, someone may say, well, there's no way they're going to drag him off to the gulag. That's ridiculous. Well, I can tell you that if you are charged with this and you're taken to court, they can bankrupt you from the attorney fees alone,
like that.
just like that, right? Even if it's totally frivolous, you have to pay for a lawyer, and they're not cheap. And they can drag this out until finally you'll have to sell that piece of land because you're complete completely broke. I mean, there are so many
Like it,
ways.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you could easily. I mean, and also like this administration has already shown they will prosecute and persecute political enemies just
absolutely.
because you
Right.
disagree with them. They've done it with James Comey. They've done it with Tish James. They've done it, with other people, and they're, continuing down that path. And he has a willing, useful idiot in Pam Bondi who will do anything that he says. And they have completely corrupted
Hmm.
the Justice Department into being uh, a weapon to be used, as opposed to, actually going out and, indicting people for real crimes,
Right. Yeah.
and so this is what we've come to. But then, then they've also shown, I mean, going back to the whole ICE and the I don't even want to say anti-immigrant because like they have arrested US citizens and put them in
Yeah.
jail without
U.S.
probable
citizens.
cause or due process for weeks and months at a time. So like you could not only end up bankrupt, but you could end up, even as a citizen, you could end up in jail for doing nothing for months at a time. Then you've got the legal costs. And then trust me, these people want to expand their activities. And like the people that end up on this list are the next logical targets. And, I mean, I don't know where it ends. I don't think these people have any, moral framework that would, cause them to pause and wonder, well, should we do this? The only question they ask themselves is, can we get away with it?
Right. That's it.
And yeah, it's frightening.
All right. You want to wrap this up with some discussion on Democrats primarying Democrats?
Yeah. So, it's not like Democrats primarying Democrats is a totally new thing, but I think it's getting some attention from the Democratic establishment largely because it's been successful. And what I mean by that is like, the probably the most well-known example is Zoran Mamdani in New York coming out of nowhere, like not even appearing on the polls, well in advance of the primary for New York mayor, and then just taking the city by storm, but also capturing the imagination out in the rest of the country. You have other, and I don't want to just make this about left versus left of center or moderate Democrats, but I view it as establishment versus anti-establishment, and I view it as also corporatist Democrats versus non-corporatist Democrats. And some of it's generational too. It's sometimes younger candidates who are looking at, somebody who's been in office for years and years and saying it's time for our generation to have a shot and to have a voice and to have representation. But whether you want to look at it ideologically or you want to look at it in terms of actual just track record, I noticed that there's a whole buzz going on around this. And recently, the other weekend, Barack Obama made a statement. He was in California for the Democratic National Committee get together sets of meetings, and he essentially said, "Hey, Democrats, let's not have a bunch of ideological fights in advance of the midterms. Let's just focus single mindedly on winning the midterms, and we can sort that stuff out later. And some of it will sort itself out once we, have candidates for president for 2028." And I just got to say, I mean, I don't track with a number of things that Obama has been for or that he did during his presidency or post presidency. And this is definitely one of those things. I'm not saying like I love certain things about Barack Obama and I respect him as a person, but this is madness in my opinion because I first of all to think that we would like what is it that we're supposed to avoid doing and saying
Right.
like like, does that mean that people that are more progressive should just abandon their principles, not
Mhm.
enter into these primary fights, not articulate an alternate vision for the country and for humanity? I mean, like, and just and then we're going to trust that the Democratic establishment will suddenly decide to start doing the right things. I don't know, man. I hear that and now I'm hearing like, you know, a chorus of voices, Democrats, in Congress. Dan Goldman is one of them. He's getting a primary from the left and he's unhappy about it and saying that, well, I shouldn't have to spend money on this. Like, what? These people think they just get to keep
Yeah,
going in office by default now because they won one election?
right. Yeah.
Like, what the
I mean, they
fuck?
just completely removed from the fact that, they're working for us. And if we don't think you're doing a good enough job, we're going to put somebody else up there that we think is going to do a better job for us. It's
Exactly.
not about you.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Right. And I think you just hit on something there, Tom, which is I think they think it is about them. And
They exactly.
I'll pick on Dan Goldman because you know what? I liked Goldman when he was a Senate or he was a staffer on the Hill. He's an accomplished lawyer and he was going after Trump during his impeachment trials and he was standing tall in that regard. But then Goldman, particularly, has an extremely pro Israel, pro Zionist, I should say, point of view. Well, I've got news for Dan Goldman. That's not very popular in the Democratic Party now.
Right.
And that's why you're getting primaried
Exactly.
primarily, and the fact that you're really not that progressive. But let's just put that aside for a second and make it about that one position. Well, people don't like it on a number of levels. They don't want our candidates supporting any foreign country above our own interests. So you need to keep that in mind. And I respect the fact that he is Jewish and I get like I'm not like angry because he supports Israel per se, but he supports it in a way that I don't think the base agrees with anymore, which is like, how do you claim to be a progressive, but then you unquestionably support Netanyahu and what the right wing government in Israel has done in not just yes, in response to October the 7th, but also in response to decades of what amounts to apartheid rule
Hmm.
in Israel and the abuse and diminishment of the Palestinian people, like, okay, like there's a lot of people who don't like that, who aren't comfortable with that. They weren't comfortable with the US sending offensive weaponry to Israel and the big bombs that just leveled Gaza. And so, like, you know what? You took a position. There's going to be somebody competing with you now because of the positions
Right.
that you took.
Right.
I say deal with it, man. I mean,
You
like
know, right.
we are
That's
only
right.
going to get the leaders that we deserve by promoting competition. And then I'll just I want to make this too like this is a big thing because like a lot of these house members and leaders of the Democratic Party are very much part of the establishment and they have been, I'm sorry, I don't know how else to say it other than they've been selling us out for decades. If you want to know why we don't have a livable minimum wage, it's just as much the fault of the establishment Democrats as it is the Republicans because they're in bed with the same people. They're taking huge amounts of money from these organizations. And so I think that there are a lot of people that are fed up with that, that see the duplicity of a Chuck Schumer, of a
Mhm.
Hakeem Jeffries, and how the money is corrupting everything behind the scenes and even to extent in our faces. And I'm tired of hearing these establishment people whining about people with different ideas. And I'm like, okay, why don't you go debate them? Why don't you,
Right.
like
Yeah.
save your fire for the debate against, the primary debates or whatever. But like, if you think that we're just going to stop and we're going to like wave the white flag and say, we're just going to be, no, I'm sorry. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It never really has. And to the extent that we've let the establishment lie to us and take advantage of us, I think this is a sign that people aren't going to let that be the case going forward. And I think it's a good thing. So maybe, you know, keep whining because then we'll know like who you are and
Yep.
what you're made of.
What you're dealing with. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if he ever took APAC money, but I respect the fact that he stood up and said, this is what I believe in. But to your point, there are consequences for that. And if that's not representative of your constituency, then you have a challenger because he is supposed to represent his constituency. And if his constituency says, got it, you support Israel to the point that you did, but we don't want someone like that in this particular district, then we're going to put somebody else in there. It's not about you. And
Right.
this is a lead into another good example of what these establishment Dems are. The face of the establishment Dem, Chuck Schumer, is endorsing Janet Mills in Maine. Janet Mills is the governor in Maine, who would be 79 years old if she were to win and take office. Her primary challenger is Graham Plattner. And I listened to Graham Plattner's interview on the New Yorker radio hour and really got a chance to kind of hear what he has to say. I'm all in on Graham Plattner. I'll speak briefly about, some of the controversy surrounding him. He does an excellent job explaining this. I feel I recommend that you listen to this interview on the New Yorker radio hour, available on any podcast platform, I am certain. But he does explain why he made some bad decisions about things that he put on Reddit and some tattoos and this kind of thing. And if you listen to him, I believe he's very earnest. And he talks about transformation, transformational politics. You really can't have transformational politics without change. He's not that guy anymore that said that. And I'm like, yes, you know, this is another problem with the establishment Democrats. It becomes a finger wagging thing. They want to basically tear down someone else and to elevate themselves in their position. This is not good for us. Anyone who demonstrates that they have changed and that their ideals are aligned with the betterment of American people now, by all means, let me hear you because anyone deserves a second chance. And this guy is really good. I certainly hope, the fact that he's not being endorsed by these established Democrats to me is an endorsement in and of itself because I certainly feel that the people in Maine, are feeling the same pain we are. He actually talks about this, how, he's from a small town and how the people there are working 3 jobs and still not able to afford rent. Well, you know, anyone with any kind of common sense knows that this is not America working. You cannot work 3. You should not be able to work. You should be able to afford a place to live with 40 hours a week, the standard work week. That's not happening. That's a problem. He's talking about fixing it completely in support of Medicare for all. I haven't even heard Janet Mills' position on this. You're certainly not going to hear a peep about that out of Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries because, oh my God, they're more worried about saying something that's going to hurt them than saying something that they feel is going to benefit, their stance on something. They're just
Yeah.
cowards. They're spineless. They're so fearful of losing their job that they'll do anything to maintain it. By all means,
Yeah.
primary the living hell out of it.
Yeah, Tom. I mean, first of all, beautifully said. Agree with everything that you had to say there. I'm 100% behind Plattner as well. And for, you know, all the reasons you outlined and more, don't, it has been a long time since I've seen a candidate that has such a specific platform. If you go to his website, you may not see every issue under the sun because it's kind of hard to do that, but he's extremely specific and he has a bunch of different areas that he talks about. He lets you know exactly where he stands on the issues, whether it's Medicare for all, which is a big one for me and for you and for pretty much anyone who isn't rich and has to worry about the cost of healthcare. That should be the first thing that you want to know about a candidate, in my opinion, because that would solve
Correct.
so many of our problems when it comes to healthcare. But then you're right. Look at Chuck Schumer. Look at the people Chuck Schumer takes, who he takes money from. He takes money from hedge funds, from venture capital companies,
Of course.
from fossil fuel companies, energy companies. He takes money from big law. He takes money from big pharma. And
Mhm.
the way that these cats stay in power is that they put themselves at the top of the money pyramid. Then they get to direct the flow of money,
That's right.
and that keeps them in power,
That's right.
and it allows them to select the candidates that they want that will be complicit with their agenda, and then they have them under their thumb because you know what? I'm going to turn off the spigot. You're not going to get this big flow of corporate and oligarch money that is coming through their office and through their PACs and so forth. And so that's how they maintain their grip on power. It's the same for Hakeem Jeffries. And it's why you see the Democratic Party is operating. It's almost like they're operating from the 80s and 90s. Like greed is good, all capitalism is good. And you're like, what fucking decade are you in? What reality do
Yeah.
you live in that you
Yeah.
think that the average American person, that the middle class and the working class in this country are somehow getting ahead? Well, that the opposite is true. So we can talk about all the, lying that MAGA does, and they do. There's no question about it. And is an establishment Democrat relatively better than a MAGA Republican in office? Sure. I mean, I'll agree that they're not as repulsive on the social issues. But if you think that they have your economic interest in mind, I got news for you, man. That's not true. We're not going to get any of the things that we need.
Correct.
Um, we're
Medicare
not
for
going to
all.
get the childcare that we need.
Right.
We're not going to get the educational opportunities that we need. We're not going to get a livable minimum wage because the same establishment Democrats had power during Biden. They had the opportunity to take care of all that stuff. And Chuck Schumer was in charge of the Democrats in the Senate at that time. Now, Nancy Pelosi did manage, and the House Democrats did manage to pass most of the legislation or a lot of the legislation that would have addressed that some of those issues either well or at least partially, but it all died in the Senate. And so I don't think we can trust those people to always do the right things for the working and middle class in this country. And so I don't get like when Obama or anybody else says, "Hey, let's just all like hold hands around the campfire and let's just get elected and then once we get in power again, we'll sort this out." I'm like, "I think we tried that. I think we did that several times now."
I know, right?
I'm like, "Give me a break, man. You can sell me down the river once, but,
Right.
you know,
No, no, we're coming with a
yeah,
hammer. we're going to push
Yeah,
this.
and I don't see it I don't see it as like simple ideology. I just think it's like, whose side are you on? Like, if you can stand up and say the word oligarch and, and talk about what corporate America's done over the last 20, 30, 40 years to America and hollowed out the middle class, if you can talk about what's right for healthcare, or what's, what do normal basic people need to have a decent life in this country, it's
Right.
not that complicated.
No,
And if
it's
you
not.
focus on those issues, I don't care what, like, you you you're a Democrat, you Democratic Socialist of America member, fine. If you're not, fine. But if you just go issue by issue, and we'll be talking about these a lot more, and you stand with the people, then you're going to be far more electable. You're going to help improve the brand of the Democratic Party, because I could tell you who destroyed the brand of the Democratic Party. The establishment did, because you walked away from labor, you walked away from the working class and from the middle class, and they know it. And that's why you, as a party, you're so unpopular. And to
That's
think
right.
that if they,
That's right.
like, here's what they think, Tom. They think that they can ride the anti-Trump wave back to
That's
power,
exactly what they're
and they
doing.
may be right. They may get, we may collectively get power back, but if we don't do something with that power, then it will all be for nothing. We will have done
Exactly.
nothing to preserve democracy, and we will have done nothing to make regular people's lives better.
That's right.
And I got news for everybody. Like, I'm sorry, I'm going on a rant here, but I can't help it.
Bring it. Bring it.
Let's go back to healthcare, because I think that really touches everybody. Whether you get your currently you get your insurance from your employer, or you get it through the marketplace. I think everybody knows that the healthcare system in America is well and truly fucked. That
Yeah.
it is broken
Yeah.
all the way all the way through. And we could talk about that for hours upon hours. But I think that most people would agree with us. Let us know if you don't. If you think healthcare in America is great, I'd love to hear that argument. But the bottom line is this: in the short term, we absolutely should continue fighting to pass subsidies, the premium subsidies for Obamacare. But the truth is, Obamacare from the very beginning
Yeah.
was a band aid on a much
Yeah.
bigger problem.
That's right.
It was
That's right.
never the long term answer, and it's falling to pieces now. And that's why these subsidies have to be put in place.
That
And
is
that's
right.
probably one area of agreement that I have with Republicans, is that Obamacare does need to be replaced. It needs to be replaced with public health care, which every other advanced industrialized country has, and we don't. And as a result, we all pay 2 to 3 times more than any other country for
Mhm.
healthcare that doesn't
That's
really
it's
work
not as
for
good.
anybody
Right.
unless you're rich,
Right. That's right.
you know? So, like, to bring it home, like, that's why we don't want more of what the establishment Democrats are selling, because they're in bed with big pharma. They're
That's
in
right.
bed with the healthcare facilities. They're in bed with the insurance companies, who are the worst of all of them. They're just a bunch of bloodsuckers that have gotten in the middle, and now they're just out of the American people and making healthcare not work for us. It works for them, and it's the reason why they're so wealthy and everybody else isn't. And so,
So, yeah, anyone watching this, let me tell you, you're probably going to hear healthcare on every episode. This
yeah.
is, it's my tent pole. It's probably John's. We may have a couple, but that is one of the primary tent poles. And we're going to hear more. And I promise that we're going to bring some more research that's going to basically help you be educated so that you can make that argument wherever you are, because it is absolutely critical. Um,
And
just go ahead, John.
just to add to that, Tom, real quick, because, like, yeah, healthcare is huge for so many reasons. We don't have to go over that. But also, the same types of things are impacting every big category of expense for Americans. So, housing. Well, you've got hedge funds buying up huge
Right.
inventory of housing in
Right.
all major markets across the country. That impacts costs. And I'm not saying it's the only thing, but when you look at the wealthy investor class, and you look at every category of expense that normal Americans have, there's a reason that all of those things have gone up so much and are so unaffordable. And it's because they've rigged the system. And so, as we go through all of these different areas and talk about what's impacting it, just keep in mind that if somebody's taking huge campaign contributions and money from these big wealthy corporations and oligarchs, you shouldn't be surprised when their behavior and their voting record doesn't end up in your favor. And so we're going to be calling that out because that's exactly what Tom and I and what other people, both other commentators and pundits, but also candidates who want to make positive change happen. That's what we need to focus on. It's like where the money in politics, what it's doing, who's behind it, who's taking the money, and what impact is that having on you, and then how can we change it? How can we,
How
you
can we
know,
change it?
elect better leaders and make sure that we're moving in a positive direction and making things affordable and fair. And I don't know how that's an extreme demand. Like if all we want is to make things affordable and fair, that seems like a recipe that should work for everybody, even if you are wealthy.
Yeah, I do. I do think that, there's what they call the horseshoe effect where those on the left, those on the right, basically, if you really went down the checklist, there's so many things similar about what it is that they want to achieve. Again, the problem with the Democrats is that you have people at the top, the face, that are not messengers because they are compromised. Period.
Yeah, they're not honest brokers,
Yeah. And
and
everyone knows it.
yeah.
And everyone knows it. So it's going to be very difficult to pull from that 36% of eligible voters that just didn't vote at all, unless you can give them a message and a messenger that they can buy into, that they can believe, that they can follow. That's the problem. I think we got it, but we need someone who's going to say these things, stand behind them. It's very simple. Have a plan on how to do it and basically stay true to it. Don't start going down that path of just telling us something you think we want to hear and you're doing something behind the scenes. The DNC decides
Yeah.
not to release its postmortem. It
I was
just,
gonna bring that up if you
yeah,
did, so I'm glad you brought that up.
you know,
Same deal.
this is the shit that just pisses me off. It's like, this is about us. Who do you think you are? You release it. You're not releasing it because you think it's going to hurt your little power structure. That's it. I don't care. Dissolve that. Your job is to get people into office that are going to represent us. We're telling you what we want. You know the problems, but you don't want to basically wipe the mascara off. It's just, damn it.
Yeah. No, Tom, your anger's justified. I think, like, hopefully our listeners are not tuning out, because I think most people, like, they don't give a shit about the DNC. They don't know that much about it or pay attention, but I think they should, because you look at it, and a party that's not willing to open itself up to examination, both self-examination, like, okay, why did we lose? What's wrong here?
Yeah.
And then to, like, and just to be clear here, so that we put accountability where it's deserved. Ken Martin is currently the chair of the DNC. So he
Mm-hmm.
heads up the DNC. He ran for that position saying that he would conduct this audit of the loss and would release the results. So let's be clear. He has backtracked on his promise. He has broken his promise. And his reason for that is we don't want to disrupt the positive momentum that we've seen. Well, the positive momentum, I mean, I'm going to give credit to like individual candidates that have run their races, but the reason that there's a swing back toward the Democrats is not because they magically improved their
Right.
position with the American people. It's because they are so against what the Trump fascist
Correct.
regime is doing.
That's
So
it. Yeah.
they're reacting against the lies. They're reacting against the fact that they never had any intention of doing anything to lower prices or do anything. So it's all a counter reaction that the Democrats are benefiting from, but there's a question if you're not facing the reasons that the Democratic brand went into the tank over the last many years,
Right. Many
uh,
years. Correct.
then it's again, I think that's what the Democratic establishment wants because they benefit from going back to or not departing from the status quo that I mean, let's face it, folks, the status quo is what made Trump and Trumpism possible. The anger that's out in the country about how the government operates and fails to deliver for us is justified. And whether you put a MAGA spin on it and want to talk about the deep state, or you put a progressive spin on it and talk about the oligarchy, which is it's all the same thing. You want to my thing is there a deep state? Yes, there's a deep state. And it's what we have right now in front of our fucking faces. It is the billionaire class sitting
Yeah.
in the administration and putting their talons into our government and stealing your money, my money, the taxpayers' money, giving themselves contracts, all this crazy shit that, you know, people maybe filter out 90% of it, but they feel it in their, in their wallet and their budget. And people, I think if you asked most people out there know that we're getting screwed. And so this is it. This is like, this is the corruption in action. And these are the people, like, if we go back to the status quo, it's going to be a disaster for everybody, regardless of your political party. And it's also the reason I think, Tom, to your point, and you rightly hit on this frequently, and I'm glad that you keep bringing us back to the 36% of people that don't vote. Ask yourself why they don't vote. And we can criticize people and say, oh, well, they're low information. And maybe that's true for some of them. But a lot of them are just fed up. They look at both parties and they say, it doesn't matter because I could vote for this guy or this
Mhm.
woman or that woman.
Mhm.
And I'm going to get the same result because they don't care. They're just
Doesn't
trying to
matter who I
line
vote
their
for.
pockets or
That's
they're
right.
trying to get, hey, trust me, Congress or the Senate, it's not a bad gig if you can get it. Because once you're
Mm-mm.
in there, you're probably going to stay in there. The longer you stay in there, the more all of this money gets pointed in your direction. And then
Yep.
you retire and you become a paid lobbyist that makes millions and millions of dollars. And so
Correct. It's
I
good game.
understand why people hate that. I
Yeah.
hate it.
Yeah, I
You
do too.
should hate it.
We'll
It's
talk about
everything that's broken with the system. And I thought that Ken Martin's cowardice and his you know, oath breaking in terms of what he promised to do was a bunch of bullshit. And it is exactly what you would expect out of the establishment. And so it really sucks. And yeah, we should just keep calling out everything. And for the people, and I know we're going long on time, but for the people that want us to hold back and to not criticize Democrats and try to call that a circular firing squad,
can
you
assure you
don't
it's not
get
gonna
it.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not gonna stop because we're not gonna get the leaders that we deserve by laying off. Like, that's just not gonna happen, and nothing's gonna change. So, we're gonna keep doing it. We're gonna do it now. We'll do it next episode. We'll do it the episode after. We're gonna do it all through the midterms because hopefully, even if we don't take control of the Democratic Party completely, but in the process of the midterms, we're going to make progress. And then we're going to keep doing it until we turn the establishment Democrats into the smallest minority we can.
Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
not left versus left of center versus right versus any of that. It is ideological, but it's ideological about taking your oath of office seriously and serving your constituents.
That's right.
It's that simple. If you keep that as your North Star,
That's right.
then you could be a sort of, non-leftist Democrat, and I'll support you and I'll say good things about you. But you got to have the right positions. And if you don't have the right positions, then it it all is fair. Like, we're coming after you, whether you're Janet Mills because the only reason Chuck Schumer is running and supporting Janet Mills is because Graham Plattner said he wouldn't
Yeah,
vote for you as leader, and he
exactly.
made it clear that he thinks that you're in the tank, and you are. And number two, he knows that he can't control you, and that he can't get you to moderate back to a corporate friendly set of policies that his donors
Yeah,
want.
that's right.
And so I call bullshit, and I'm sorry, Obama, if this bothers you, but I think it's bullshit that you made the suggestion. I think that, that the Democratic Party needs to evolve and get, like, not just better, like way better fast. People have caught on to what's going on. And if you're going to keep trying with this failed strategy, and the other people that benefit from not putting out this autopsy is the political consultant class, and they make millions and millions of
I
dollars
know. Right.
for failed advice, bad advice.
Exactly.
They gave bad advice to Kamala. They've been giving bad advice for a long time, and they make huge amounts of money by buying. They get paid for traditional media buys. That's where they make big money. And so, if you want to know where that $2 billion went that didn't elect Kamala Harris, start looking there. And the autopsy wasn't going to be kind to those people. So follow the money. Always follow the money.
Let's wrap it up with
You will
that.
get your answers.
Let's wrap it with that, John. Good way
All
to
right.
close. Everybody, don't forget, please like and subscribe. We will be back
Yes.
next week.
We need your support. Tom and I are trying to build something good here that makes an impact and brings you the information you need to make your decisions about what's really going on. And we need your support. So please, absolutely like, subscribe, comment,
Yeah.
engage with us. And we're just going to keep fighting the good fight. And hopefully, we'll all together help bring change that's needed here.
All right, everybody. See you next week. Thanks very much. Have a very happy, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whichever you prefer. And we're out of here.
Peace.